All right. So this CNN article, I pulled out a couple of choice pieces. The thing that everyone's paying attention to is her fear that she's going to be locked up by Trump. But the whole article is incredible in its dishonesty and its derangement and in the kind of just absolute ass kissing that the so-called journalist here, Oliver Darcy, is doing with her. It's just amazing. So I pulled out a couple of choice things aside from her fear that Trump's going to lock her up. This is the quality of journalism you get at CNN. It's somehow, this is Maddow's response to a question. It's somehow comforting and discomforting at the same time to look at previous instances where factually unhinged conspiratorial narratives have taken hold in mainstream politics. Wow. Imagine that. Imagine if unhinged conspiratorial narratives were to take hold in mainstream politics. Rachel would know nothing about that, never having been the font of such things. One of the takeaways from that history is just the confirmation that, yes, we're quite susceptible to that as a country, but also that patient, responsible, consistent debunking and criticism of those lies has an effect on the American people. It takes a long time, and it doesn't reach everyone, but it can influence the median voter in a way that ultimately can be decisive. So in other words, the troglodytes, the poors, the ignorant, the dummies out there, it's hard to reach them. But if you try really hard and you're very consistent, you can bring fire to the savages eventually. And I'm just the person to do it. Now, this one is really funny. Often MSNBC is compared to Fox News. People say they watch Fox for the conservative perspective and MSNBC for the liberal perspective. This is the journalist. It's obviously a flawed argument, given that Rupert Murdoch's channel operates with no regard for basic truth. But you must hear this argument made. How do you respond to it? Maddow responds, I'm hoping our work speaks for itself. So how has her work spoken for itself? Well, even the Washington Post called out Maddow. Rachel Maddow rooted for the Steele dossier to be true. Then it fell apart. But not just liberal rag WAPO. A real journalist, Max Blumenthal, caught up with Rachel Maddow to ask her about that. And he says here, Rachel Maddow doesn't do Q&A from the audience, so I had to find another way to ask her about her relentless promotion of the most discredited hoaxes of Russiagate, from the Steele dossier to Russian bounties. She peered silently at my badge, and security quickly pounced on me. So some of you may have seen this. It's a couple years back, but let's take a look.
On overthrowing the U.S. government. And members of Congress who were sympathetic.
Rachel, this speech is boring and paranoid. Can you explain why you promoted the Steele? Why did you promote the Steele dossier, which has been proven to be a lie? Why did you promote the lie of Russian bounties?
Come on, let's go.
Can you ever be held accountable for the lies you told Americans for years and years and years? You lied to Americans for years.
Let's go.
Silence is violence, Rachel.
You're out. You're out.
Let's go.
There you go. You want my badge?
Thank you.
Here you go. I'm walking out.
All right. So this was that was a year ago, actually.
Yeah, just over a year ago. He tweeted it out June 2nd of last year.
Yeah. So a lot of you probably remember that. I had a similar experience with trying to get a response from Maddow. Her policy is clearly just to wait for security to handle the troglodytes and take them out. But that is just amazing for Rachel Maddow. And maybe more amazing than Rachel Maddow having no sense of irony about talking about the negative impact of conspiracies and conspiracists on the American polity, than a journalist from another outlet, a theoretically rival outlet, questioning her unskeptically, uncritically, even making sure that he does not in any way offend Rachel by saying, well, of course, that's crazy to compare MSNBC and Fox News because MSNBC has a love of the facts. Can you pull that up again?
Yeah, just before we do, you would think it'd be in his interest to sort of paint, I mean, by his, I mean CNN's interest, to sort of paint MSNBC and Fox as sort of the mirror image of
Right.
the other one.
Right.
I mean, why wouldn't they want to do that? That's how they establish their brand as just we call balls and strikes here, right? But no, he vouched for her. He definitely vouched for her.
Okay, so this is the one that's really getting all of the focus. Maddow joins what is becoming really a drumbeat among liberal commentators and politicians of fear of being locked up should Trump win. So the question is, Trump and his allies are openly talking about weaponizing the government to seek revenge against critics in media and politics, with some of his extremist allies even talking about jailing their fellow Americans. You're one of his most notable critics on television. Are you worried that you could be a target? And Maddow responds, I'm worried about the country broadly if we put someone in power who is openly avowing that he plans to build camps to hold millions of people and to root out what he's described in subhuman terms as his enemy from within. I would direct you all, by the way, to Matt Orfala's typically masterful video compilation of Maddow, amongst others, describing Republicans and conservatives as rats. To continue, again, history is helpful here. He's not joking when he says this stuff, and we've seen what happens when people take power proclaiming that kind of agenda. I think there's a little bit of head in the sand complacency that Trump only intends to go after individual people he has already singled out. Do you really think he plans to stop at well-known liberals? It also seems pretty clear that some people in politics might think they'll be on the safe side, that they might even benefit from it if they side with Trump. Ask Mike Pence about how that works out in the end. When Trump invokes the Insurrection Act to deploy the U.S. military against civilians on his first day in office, do you think he then rescinds the order on day 2? For that matter, what convinces you that these massive camps he's planning are only for migrants? So yes, I'm worried about me, but only as much as I'm worried about all of us. Well, that's reassuring. Rachel's not just worried about herself. She's worried about all the shitlib aunts and uncles that make Thanksgiving such a joy for all the rest of us.
Yes, I'm worried about the people who buy my books as well, not just me.
Not just those who get paid millions of dollars to spew bullshit, but those who consume our bullshit.
Right.
Are part of my concern. But she's not the only one spreading this paranoid fantasy, which I must say, for most Americans, and this is how out of touch and elite class they are, they don't understand that all of this is threatening people with a good time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
For most people, when Rachel Maddow says Trump might lock her up, that is a campaign advertisement.
Right.
For Trump. If people thought he would really do that, his polls would jump 5 points. But not to be outdone, here's Nicole Wallace also claiming that she's in danger from a Trump presidency.
I've seen that toast a bunch of times, but it landed very differently this year. Because depending on what happens in November, 7 months from right now, this time next year, I might not be sitting here. There might not be a White House Correspondents' Dinner or a free press. While our democracy wouldn't exactly fall apart immediately without it, the real threat looms larger. A candidate with outward disdain, not just for a free press, but for all of our freedoms and for the rule of law itself.
So that was right after the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which she sounds like she's still drunk from the White House Correspondents' Dinner. She's like slurring her words. Sounds like she had a great time at what, in her mind, could be the last one. I guess she wanted to go out in style.
How out of touch do you have to be to talk about, although for the audience that would actually watch Nicole Wallace not as part of their submission at Guantanamo to the guards, but by voluntarily watch this for pleasure. What she's saying makes total sense, but that's why they're losing once again to Eric Cartman, because these people are so fucking loathsome. They're the only people on earth who could make Donald Trump look like a good option. She's talking about these elite institutions that people absolutely fucking despise going away as a reason not to vote for Donald Trump. And again, this plays completely differently to the vast majority of Americans. Everything she's describing, Nicole Wallace no longer being on the air, the White House Correspondents' Dinner not happening anymore. How many people in the country would you say that to would say, oh, that would be terrible?
Right. Right. No, of course. Well, this just goes back to the FDR for freedom speech. You know, if you don't make democracy work for people, they are not going to give a shit about its fate. You know, the way fascism is ushered in is not because people one day consciously decide they want to be ruled over by fascists. It's because democracy doesn't pay off anymore. So if they don't feel that this quote unquote, democratic system of ours has their best interest at heart, then why should they have its best interest at heart? What's in it for them? Nothing. So it's not that, look, most people don't even know who she is. Most people probably don't even know when the White House Correspondents' Dinner takes place, if they know what it is at all. Most people don't care about maintaining the system because most people don't feel like the system has done anything for them. It's not that there's this rebellion at the gates and that everybody's going to overthrow the government. It's that you have people motivated on both sides. There are those really angry people on the right. There were some angry people on the left, but the DNC team seemed to tame them, right? And then you have this large swath of people who are mostly apathetic, who are mostly checked out, who mostly feel no investment in the outcome either way, because they have not been given a reason to. That's the real threat to these people. It's actually not the angry mob. It's the huge swath of people who stopped giving a shit because their precious democracy hasn't compelled them to give a shit because it has sold them out to money.
Well, and also she's representing a media that everyone except Democrats recognizes is corrupt and untrustworthy. And saying and representing it as this cornerstone of democracy, and that just doesn't make sense to anyone because they can see that it is not. You say to a real Democrat, well, Joe Biden and his family are fucking criminals. It's obvious. They will lose their minds because they sit there with their brains stewing in this propaganda all day, telling you that anyone who thinks that is basically a Nazi. When it's quite clear, if you attached the same fact pattern to the Trump family that attaches to the Biden family, they would see very quickly the criminality. It's not like you have to go on some Indiana Jones quest through the jungles into a cave with a bag of sand to find the truth about the Biden family. It's pretty out in the open what they're doing. So to go out there and say, well, we have to defend a free press, or that someone like Nicole Wallace is a defender of the free press and the rule of law, hey, you all want to trot around Stormy Daniels as some kind of hero. Most people see that as a political prosecution. So you've completely lost that argument as well. But it's not something that they would ever acknowledge.
All right, here we go.
All right, so now AOC. AOC did a podcast with Kara Swisher, in which she too has this. I'm starting to think this is a liberal kink. Oh, please, Mr. Trump, don't lock me up and make me eat the bad food.
Role playing. Yeah.
This is another one. AOC worried that she's going to be put in jail.
What happens to you if Donald Trump wins? What do you do? What's your first move?
I mean, it sounds nuts, but I wouldn't be surprised if this guy threw me in jail.
Really?
He's out of his mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did his whole first campaign around lock her up. Like, this is his motto.
Oh, he didn't say that, He said he didn't say it. Teasing.
Yeah, right?
See that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he didn't say that. Did he do it? Did he end up doing it? Because that's the more important thing, right? He didn't actually do it, did he?
Well, not only that, Joe Biden, for decades, has been claiming to have been a civil rights activist that he never was. He has been forced to come out and admit that he was not telling the truth about it. And he's still doing it. He did it again a couple of months ago, claimed to have been present at a civil rights action that he was not present at. So is he out of his mind? Because this is before he literally started to be out of his mind. This is before dementia. He lied about trying to meet Nelson Mandela. Is that not out of his mind? You got to be pretty crazy when you're a public figure. You know there's cameras around wherever you go, right? He was a senator at the time that he's describing. How do you think you could get away with telling people that? How is that better than Donald Trump, who, when I saw his rally, when the woman passed out, says, yeah, some people were waiting out there for 2 days. It's pretty terrible. He's a reflexive liar. So is Joe Biden. And I would say about very often about more weighty matters.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I take him at his word. I take him at his word. I take him at his word when he says that he's going to round up people. I take him at his word when he threatens journalists. I take him at his word. I feel like what we saw in his first presidency was an amuse-bouche to what his intentions are. He has learned from his mistakes of appointing professionals, and he will not make that mistake next time.
Well, one thing he might do differently this time is actually try and prosecute Democrats because, I don't know, they did it to him. You know what I mean? Like, he might just go back and do it. Like, he might go for it. Now, AOC is still pretty young. I don't know if she's done anything yet. I don't know if he can nail her on something. Nancy Pelosi probably could. Most of these senior Democrats, he probably could. She's probably safe for the time being.
Well, and they're constantly contradicting themselves because on the one hand, when Trump was president, they were constantly claiming that the justice system was under his control. And he gets prosecuted, and they claim that it's a conspiracy theory, Trump claiming that the president can control the justice system that way. It's a different branch of government. There's not that kind of control. And now Trump is going to be president again. Now they're swinging back to Trump is going to have this direct control over the justice system. Which is it? It's kids in cages or migrant detention centers, right? It depends on who the president is.
Yeah, no, as the calendar draws near to November, you're going to start seeing a lot more of this. I mean, it's literally all they have to run on. And it doesn't seem to be working so far, but you never know. People, especially progressives, tend to be susceptible to that. I mean, right now there's this big abandon Biden movement. Are
they this time, though? Are they?
Well, this is the question. Like, I don't think the Arab and Muslim voters are. I think they have too personal a connection to what's going on and what Biden is responsible for to actually chicken out at the last minute. Some of these, campus types, some of them are going to hold the line. Some of them won't. It's a matter of, who sticks it out and who doesn't. That's going to be extremely critical in places like Michigan, in places like Wisconsin, where you have a giant college town like Madison, where the Democrats count on for so many of their votes, how many of them stay home. That's a question. But the play that you're going to see coming down the home stretch is exactly what we just saw, coming from media talking heads and coming from the AOCs out there.
Sure. And how effective is that going to be? Because, again, the idea of a bunch of despised, wealthy journalists and politicians saying you can't vote for Trump because Trump is going to put us in prison. Right. I don't think that's the winning pitch they seem to think it is.
I don't think so either.
Please clap.